sir.
What?
Everybody there?
Yo. It's been a while, but we're back in effect.
Yep. A little lag going on my end, but hopefully everybody's experiencing it. There's a slight bit of lag over here on my end, but I hope it's just on my end. Am I lagging on your end, Brady?
It's really lagging on my end. This is the same issue I was trying to fix before. But it still seems like it's popping up.
Yeah.
I wonder.
Well, hold up. You're starting to sync a little more. Let's see.
Yeah, it seems like it just came on, like everything just came together.
Okay, yeah. Give it a little time.
But
patience,
it's still...
let patience have its work in you, right?
It's still a little funky on my end, but it's not as bad as it was. I gotta figure out.
No, it's nowhere near on my end.
Yeah, okay.
You're pretty much synced up on my end at this point.
All right. Well, either way, welcome. Happy Nurch Day, folks. Hope you guys are having a good day so far. What's up, David DeBow in the chat? Goat Herder's Guide to the Galaxy is in the chat. Lightman 116. Shout out to the Patreon supporters. Definitely will be giving you a full shout out as we get further into the episode.
Yep. As you guys can see, we're short or shy one of the members of the Trinity. He's going out to redeem humanity, I guess.
he's been sent out from among us. He's
sir.
He's eternally what do they say? The son is eternally
coexistent.
No, eternally what do they say about the son?
Oh yes. Oh yeah. Proceeding
yeah.
proceeding. Yes.
Eternally proceeding from the Father.
Yes, from the Father, from Ichabod.
Yeah. Third good. What's happening?
We're gonna try to hold it down.
Mikey
Too
Too Hard.
Our level best to hold it down.
Yeah. Mikey Too Hard. What's going on? Bethany Keys. Appreciate you. What's happening, folks? So yeah, right before we went live, I got a note saying that my system resources were low, and so the sound might not be the best. And then when we went live, it was like bombs going off on my end in terms of the audio, but hopefully it's pretty good now. Before we do anything else, I want to read just a few of the I go with the ums again, right? I want to read a few of the messages from the last Life After Faith episode that I posted on Thursday. I had Dustin Curley on. I actually recorded Dustin's interview about a year ago, and I've got several of these Life After Faith interviews that have just been stored in the vault, waiting to go. And as I'm working on this audio project, it helps because it buys me time. I can post them instead of having to prepare for a live episode. But if there's anybody out there who you have benefited from hearing other people share their deconversion story, and you want to share your story, hit me up. The easiest way to hit me up is to message me on Facebook, Brady Fanatic. That's PHANOTIK, Goodwin on Facebook. Message me there and share a little bit about your story. Just so I can kind of see where you are in your journey, where you've come from. There are some people who have not fully deconverted yet, or maybe haven't deconstructed enough to be able to tell their story in a way that will. One of the things I like about telling stories here is that people have got to the point to be able to tell their stories in very helpful ways. They're able to look back on their process and say, here's what I thought was going on at this point when I was in. But now that I've got this critical distance, I can look back at the experience and say, here's what was really going on. So part of the conversation that I'll have with you offline is just seeing where you are in your journey and maybe even kind of helping you in some ways. But if you're at a point where you could tell your story in a helpful way, then I would love to have you come on and tell your story here on Ichabod. But if you're new, welcome to Ichabod. I am the host, Be Good, joined by my, as he says, my trusty sidekick, Jay Witt, as we call him, short for Jehovah's Witness
Yep, yep.
Protection. Was never a Jehovah's Witness, were you? Yeah. You hear me, Jay Witt?
Yes, sir.
Okay.
Yes, sir.
Yeah,
Got
was
a little
never.
mess going on here, but I'll be
Oh,
right back.
it's all kind of stuff jumping off this morning. Jay Witt was never a Jehovah's Witness. It was a little play on words that we came up with because he did not want to share his identity, and so we said it's like he's in hiding from Jehovah, from Yahweh, and then the whole name Jehovah's Witness Protection just popped up out of that. He's got his own channel. The reason why you don't see him with me on Exit Strategy every week anymore is because he's got his own channel where he is going through doing a great series right now on, I forget the name of the preacher, Philip Anthony something something. When he gets back on, he'll be able to tell us more. But his channel, he's been filling it up with content, and he took a little break, but he's back this week making more content. So make sure you're subscribed to Jay Witt. We will put the link to Jay Witt's channel in the chat in a moment. But what I want to do real quick is just read a few of the comments. I already see David DeBow in the comments here saying Dustin's interview was so great. Well, here were some of the comments under Dustin's interview. So Taryn Price said, Ichabod is like my comfort podcast now. When I need to feel sane and understood, I find myself coming here. And this comment has gotten 19 likes from our small community and a bunch of people jumping in saying, same, same, same. So I definitely appreciate that. That means a whole lot to me. I do this. You guys know I've said it before. When I was going through my deconstruction, deconversion process, I didn't share it with many people because I didn't want to confuse or, as we say in the faith, cause them to stumble the way I was stumbling. And I didn't know who else could even relate. And it was a lonely, dark period. So when I deconverted publicly, I said, I'm going to stay public for as long as I can so that nobody else, as far as I can help it, has to feel as alone as I felt when I was going through mine. So I definitely appreciate that. Uh, Franco Mind said, the best interview of this year. I really would like to know why Dustin's interview resonated with so many people. The best interview of this year. Someone else at Cosmic Kid said, wow, this is the most amazing deconstruction story I've ever heard. And I've had some pretty good deconstruction stories on the channel. Uh, Randall Archive said, this might be my favorite episode yet. Maria, Maria, the last four digits are 3203. I don't want to butcher the name there, so I'm not even going to attempt it. Said, an amazing conversation. I enjoyed every second. My sister Shah Goodwin super chatted and said, it was the subtle sociopathy for me. Dustin used that term, said Christianity has a subtle sociopathy. So a lot of comments. Why? Why do you guys think it was? If you guys can throw in the chat, maybe. Why did
Yeah.
Dustin's maybe I can ask Jay Witt now that he's back. Well, hold on. Bethany Keys is a Patreon supporter, so I'm going to read her comment. You guys can super chat if you want your comment, question read online, but she's a Patreon supporter. In the chat, Bethany Keys says, I think it's because he tried so many churches. He has so many different experiences. He can resonate with a lot of people. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. I honestly, personally, go ahead. Go ahead. Go ahead. Go ahead.
No. I was going to ask you because you hit me up about it and said you felt some kind of like you really liked what he was saying there. What do you think it? Well, no, speak for you personally. What stood out for you personally?
Yeah, I was going to say, far be it from me. I even use biblical phrasing, even when I'm talking casually. Far be it from me, right? Far be it from me to try to summarize everybody's or the broad reaction to what he's saying. One of the things I thought was notable personally was I believe in deep apostate control of the conversation, because so often we allow believers to dictate what we can talk about and how things are to be talked about or what's important. For instance, central to his deconversion was eschatology. This is a thing that believers typically will tell you is not a non-essential. And I liked his reframing of it. I like the idea that he said, no, I'm not going to let you tell me that's not essential. Nice. How is it non-essential? How is it not essential when it affects this and that? And furthermore, since there is so-called revelation on the matter of eschatology, how is it that the Holy Spirit is given to us to lead us and guide us into all truth regarding revelation? And there is absolute confusion on the matter in Christianity, in the sense that there is no consensus whatsoever. It's, in fact, the lack of consensus is so widespread that they had to deduce that this is a non-essential. You see, most of the things that they tell you are non-essential, the reason why they label it non-essential isn't because it's non-essential. It's because they've been unable to come to consensus on it. And because they have been unable to come to consensus on it, but they have to agree that they are somehow a worldwide church, they have to have a subcategory for it. And what do you call those things? You call them non-essentials.
Yeah, you relegate them to that status.
Absolutely. Yeah. Even if there are large swaths of scripture and no less than an entire book devoted to it. Like the book of Revelation is almost entirely devoted to eschatology. And then you're going to tell me as a non-essential, like, why am I allowing you to do that in this conversation? And I liked his audacity, his ability to stand up to that and say, you don't get to do that. You don't get to take a whole book of the Bible and consider it non-essential to the conversation. We're not going to let you do that as
a great point.
Converts.
Yeah, I love the way you summed up why that point matters so much for you. You called it apostate control of the conversation. On Facebook this past week, I posted a message, and it just simply said, how to destroy any religion. And the response that I put in the post was, press its text, its history, or its prophecy for literalism. Then walk away in slow motion while it explodes behind you. If you press any belief system's holy text for literalism, you will find them having to say, oh, well, we don't take that literally, or we don't take that literally anymore, or here's why that has to be figurative. It's another way of what you just said, Jay. It's relegating it to, even if they don't relegate it to something that's non-essential, what they will make non-essential is our ability to understand it. So they might say, no, it's still an essential doctrine. Jesus is going to return. You have to believe that. But our understanding of it is non-essential, which is another way to kind of backdoor that same issue.
Yep. Yeah, it's insanity that you could have something like just a handful of books in the New Testament, and you could have one book that you're saying you have something like 7 books, for instance. What I think it's 27 books in the New Testament, and then they'll tell you one of those books is non-essential. So you're telling me that the God of the universe has condescended to give us just 66 books of the Bible, 26 or 27 books actually in the New Testament, if you're going with the Western church's canon. And then one of those books, it's sort of like an elective course. Like when you're, when you're in college or in high school, you can take it or you don't have to take it. So much so that this man was teaching at churches, and they would say, hey, we don't need to get into that. How unessential, think about it.
Yeah.
In terms of efficiency, like if you're like, I've only given you 66 books, this is efficiency. This is we don't have hundreds of books. We only have, and so we got a whole book devoted to something that is an elective.
Yeah.
Like, how does that make sense?
Yeah.
How does that make? And I think
and you could
I
find
never
that.
asked the question.
Well, yeah, you could find that same trend leaking into, because yeah, you said Revelation is a whole book dedicated to it, but then you've got Second Thessalonians, you got whole chapters in
Daniel.
Matthew. Yeah, so it's like
Yeah.
God's communication is either so, like you said, either inefficient or it's not really. That was one of the things that drove me from the faith was the second you start making early Genesis, mythohistory, or all those other things, or it's allegorical, but then you got New Testament people taking that allegory and treating it literal, and you start trying to do those different things to it. I ended up saying, okay, so then what you've been calling revelation this entire time really hasn't been revealed. We don't know what we think we've known. And so either God is a poor communicator or God hasn't said this shit. Like it's one of the two. And either way, if he's a poor communicator, why to me he's not worthy of worship. And if he hasn't communicated, then I don't know who to worship. So I'm going to just gracefully bow out. You all keep last thing I'll say before we turn our attention to Job. There's a Christian who's one of the premier battle rappers in the country at this time. We got like 4 Christians who are in the battle rap world, and they're pretty high up there. Like Loso is one of the top dudes. Another guy, Street Hymns, is top dude. Street Hymns often hits me up on Facebook trying to get me to debate different people. And he's pushing this one guy at me now. Debate him. Now, this guy is I don't even want to get into the things that this guy believes, but I know he's such a small swath of what Christians believe that if I was to debate or discuss with him, I'd have 99 other different kinds of Christians saying, why you talk to him? He don't represent our views. Like,
Yeah.
and I said to him, I hope he didn't think I was trying to diss, but I said to him, I said, bro, it's a mess. Like, y'all are a mess. Your community, your Christian community, in terms of what you believe, even on the things that you're willing to call essential, you guys are a mess. And so, yeah, just that idea of, well, we don't talk about that here because it's not essential. That's a ploy. That's a tactic to not have to deal with just how divided and how divisive this inefficient or poorly communicated revelation from a God actually is.
Well,
so,
well,
yeah.
I mean, it's not essential, right? But you will still basically kick the guy out of the church for having certain views on the matter. So, like,
right.
on some level, it's like how much of it is essential or not. Like, it's like where are we, so you can't have a heterodoxy and orthodoxy on something that's non-essential.
Yeah.
Like, how can the two be maintained simultaneously?
Yeah.
Like, how can you have both a thing that you say is non-essential, how you land on the matter, but you can have heterodox views on it.
Yeah.
It's just an interesting thought, but that's a whole rabbit hole. But I thought it's just so interesting. It's like they overcome by the word of their testimony. It's so good to have the different testimonies of these individuals who are able to overcome their former faith by and me, a person who eschatology didn't, that was the last thing from driving me out.
Right.
I mean, I had more or less accepted Christian's word that this is not essential. So it was far from driving me out. But then, you leave and then you hear a guy's testimony and yeah, he didn't overcome by the word of God in his testimony, but actually the word of not God, he overcame by and his testimony.
The word of not God gave him a testimony.
Exactly.
Or gave him an testimony, we should say.
Yeah. And he was able to look at it and say, this is, and it is enlightening for me post deconversion to see, wow, that's a valid enough reason to have left. It's like I left for totally other reasons. Now that I look at your reason, I'm like, yeah, I'm glad I left. I didn't see that.
That's sort of what we do here on Ichabod is us looking back at the text. A lot of times what we're talking about is, oh, these are reasons why I should have left sooner. Had I saw this in 1999, had I saw this in 2005, had I saw this in 2008, had I saw this or that or the third any sooner, and had I not been under the spell of the religion, I probably could have and should have left sooner. We got a super chat from Adi, $5 super chat. Appreciate you. Thank you so much. Says talking about Dustin's interview. He just kept He just kept describing my religious experience and my realizations and objections. It's so strange to not feel alone after all this time. And if you guys see me in the comments under these videos throwing a hug emoji up, it's because when you say things like this, that's me just like, yo, love you. I feel you. You're not alone. I understand. And just those words, Adi, it's so strange to not feel alone after all this time. I love it. I love it.
Mm-hmm.
John Geyer also sent a $9.99 super chat, but John is also a Patreon supporter. So thank you, John. Says, my favorite moment was when Dustin highlighted the parallels between the Jesus story involving fish and fishermen and the earlier traditions of Pythagoras, suggesting a possible borrowing or reinterpretation. And John, correct me if I'm wrong, but on Facebook, I think you actually went and did your own research on it after you saw that, and then you posted uh, a whole think piece about it, if I'm not mistaken, right? So yeah, John and I are connected on Facebook. John is always posting very good think pieces on just things as he's looking at this faith that he once had and saying, well, here's another way. Here's another thing that can cause you
Yeah.
to look at it and deconstruct in great pieces. So appreciate you, John. Yeah.
Yeah. And I know you're eager we got to jump into Job 3, but I guess I don't know if I may offer this as a somewhat of a segue, also an indicator about what's been going on my channel, because I know you mentioned it while I was taking care of the mess going on here.
Mm.
I've been traveling for work for almost 2 months or whatever. I wasn't able to I'd taken the time off from the channel, actually somewhat of as a sabbatical for thought. So now that I'm coming back to the content, I hope to put up higher quality content. And when I say higher quality content, I'm going to really kind of work out these videos in advance, because the monster in front of us, that is, or shall I say the Hydra, especially in light of the fact that we can't agree on what is essential and non-essential within Christianity, right? They can't agree on that. The Hydra that is Christianity has to have each of its heads severed individually. And I'm committed to doing that in a systematic or systemic way at this point. And I want to do it very concisely. So at this point, I'm going to actually prepare. There's going to be less of the extemporaneous rants, although there will be some of that, and more really concise content, particularly dealing with this Philip Anthony Mitchell character, who I actually was afraid people would think I was attacking, but now I'm embracing the role of the adversary for him, and I'm going to just do that very self-consciously, just attack. Most of these people doing these conferences and so forth, they are not addressing the issues that your last Life After Faith guy, what was his name, Dustin, brought up. Like they're just assuming a certain amount of hegemonic orthodoxy and just running with it. And just like you can't allow the presuppositionalists to set up bifurcation fallacies and then make you abide by their rules, or you can't allow the Christian apologists to say these are non-essentials, but it's necessary that you press them on why those are non-essentials, because it will reveal other things. We can't allow them to begin with this mythological book and then start making great declarations and propositions that might actually make some sense, but the starting point is so fallacious and so mythological. I think it's important that we, every step of the way, stop them and make them rewind their theology to the point of its absurdity, that is, its mythological origins, and continuously remind them. I don't care what kind of soapbox you're going to jump on and try to preach against abortion or whatever else that you're going to take as the evil. Let's remember your origin is this mythology. That is self-evident that your book plagiarized Pythagoras, right? Like, let's keep reminding them of that, because they're never going to bring that into the conversation, right? Yeah. They're never going to say, oh, our book plagiarized Pythagoras. They're not going to say that. So that burden rests on our shoulders. We have to consistently remind them, look, not only is your book plagiarizing, It's got really bad science, as I did in my video exposing the bad science of the virginity test in Deuteronomy 22. There is no escaping some of the bad science in this book. There is no escape. You can't even, some of the science is so self-evidently bad, you can't say it's just poetic or this is allegorical. No, it's self-evident bad science. We got to keep holding their feet to the fire and say, like, look,
Yeah.
I would let you get that off if it didn't begin here. I need to stop right there.
Yeah. So here's one of the things I'll encourage you guys. If you're not, Jay, would do me a favor, drop the link to your podcast in the chat. But for those of you who are out here, one of the things I would encourage you as we get ready to dive into Job chapter 3, put on the whole armor of pod. There are so many podcasts right now that are just ready to help equip you to think through things. Maybe you don't have the time to go do the research. Myth Vision has taken the time. Maybe you don't have the time to figure out how you would word it all. Tim Mills has been putting up some great content on just how to frame things in a way that's helpful. You got folks like Michael Beverly who's interviewing folks and just doing just all. I can't name them all, but there's so many great podcasts that you could just arm yourself so that you're able to. I told somebody recently, it's not enough for me. If you weren't this kind of Christian, maybe you don't need all this, or maybe I'm just traumatized, so I need it. But it's not enough for me to just deconvert. I had done such a thorough job at training myself to think biblically about every single thing in the world that now I have to actively unthink those thoughts. And so that's why it sort of takes all this effort, because the Bible talks about having a renewed mind. Well, once you leave that stuff alone, now you need a renewed mind. And so all that to say, if you're feeling like you're ill-equipped, there's no reason why you should feel ill-equipped in this day and age. There's so much great content being put out by people who are just saying, hey, I got time, I got the passion, I'm going to go ahead and put these episodes together. David DeBoe, thank you for the $10 super chat. A key Dustin moment was when he said that his professors, the experts, didn't have answers either. That goes Brady experience, mine, other testimonies. Indeed.
Yep.
Indeed. Hey, we got to get to Job.
Yeah.
So we're diving into, I'm not even going to recap. I'm going to do just a real quick recap, I guess. So far, we've seen Satan, the Satan, show up on the day. There's a day in heaven where all the sons of God come together, and I guess to give account. And God points out to Satan, since Satan's been going all over the earth looking for whatever he's been looking for, Yahweh points out to Satan, look at my guy Job, as if he knew what Satan was looking for. You're looking for someone to accuse. You're the accuser. You couldn't find anybody? I got somebody for you to accuse. Try to accuse Job. And so they set up this bet. If you let me touch his life, if you let me touch his wealth, if you let me touch even his body, I bet he'll curse you. And Yahweh, some kind of way, we talked about this in chapter 2, he was stirred up to destroy Job for no reason. And that set us off when we talked about that. You have a God who can be dysregulated, as Al said. Your God can be dysregulated, stirred up to destroy someone. No, let me not say someone. Your God can be stirred up to destroy you without reason. Those 3 tears should be enough to make you say, I don't trust. This is why you hear many atheists and former Christians say things like, even if this God were to prove itself to be real, I still wouldn't worship it. Matter of fact, if I did, it would only be out of fear because I don't want to go to hell, but I wouldn't love him. I wouldn't love this God. There's a part in the JR interview. The JR interview should be posting soon, where he's going to say some pretty incensed things about how he feels about this God, if this God is real. But it sort of is going off
Hmm.
for this. If you could be stirred up to destroy me without reason, and I'm supposed to love you. And so
Hmm.
we looked at that, and then towards the end of chapter 2, Job's friends show up, and they don't show up right away to say anything. When they get there, they realize how bad Job's situation is, and they sit.
Well,
Let me just finish this point. They sit with him in silence for 7 days. And if you could just
mhm.
put yourself in the mindset of that, imagine going to see someone in the hospital and their situation is so bad that they're not unconscious. So it's not like you're sitting there waiting for them to wake up from their coma. They're conscious, but the situation is so bad that both you and they just sit there staring for 7 days, almost looking at each other like, I mean, I would say something, but what can I say? Like for seven
Yeah.
days. Go ahead, Jay.
Mm. I was just, I had a thought while you were recapping everything. Consider this, listener, consider the fictive and fictional nature of this book in light of the point I'm going to make now. When Satan or the Satan of this book is allowed to touch Job's family, or allowed to touch Job, let's say it's Job for like, because God gives him permission. He says, only don't touch him, basically, right?
Mm-hmm.
Then eventually he says, you can touch him. But notice how the Satan skips a very important character when he touches, before he touches Job. So it's as though the Satan has exhausted all the other individuals he can touch before he touches Job. But there's a character that's left out when he touches Job's belongings. He leaves out the wife. So remember, so one might ask, why, if you haven't exhausted, like God first is like, you got the warrant from, you were granted the search warrant from the police, from the department, right? Like you were granted from the judge the ability to execute a warrant. The initial warrant is on the family, on everything but Job. The second one is on Job. But before you need to get over to Job, you missed the most important part of the warrant, the wife. Think about this, listener. Yeah. He touches the family, he touches the livestock, and one of the most important characters before you need to get the second warrant to touch Job is almost like he's assuming I've already exhausted everything else that he has. But you haven't, sir.
Or everything that matters, everything that matters to him.
Everything that matters, right? But think about it. This is why I said consider the fictive or fictional nature.
Yeah.
The writer of the story is already anticipating Job coming out on top. He has to repopulate his family. And so instead of having to grant him a new marriage and all of that process in order to quickly repopulate his family, he leaves the wife intact so that through the same woman, he gets a second set of kids. So it's already baked into the story because, you know, the wife could have died in a home too by a tornado, but the wife doesn't. You spare her because she's going to come in handy later on in the story. This is just another way for you to see, like, if the enemy was going to attack, it's just like I said, the enemy went through all the earth, and somehow it didn't occur to him that this very wealthy person in the East named Job, it didn't occur to him that. And then God has to say, hey, wait a second, you overlooked this guy. Well, similarly, the enemy is given permission to touch everything involving Job except for him. And somehow he doesn't touch his wife. The question is, why, if he had the freedom to touch everything, including his wife, why he didn't touch the wife? Well, for one, the wife offers the temptation. Why don't you just trust God and die? So she ends up reiterating the conversation that was had between the Satan and God. I'm sorry, I'm going on and on. But just remember that this is fiction.
Yeah, yeah. And like you said, I think in chapter 1, us pointing out the fictive nature this is not to say, and therefore you shouldn't believe the Bible, because there are very many Christians who are comfortable taking Job as it's literature. It didn't literally happen. This is literature meant to make a point about God's sovereignty. So the point that Jay Witt is making is not to say just because there could be fiction in the Bible, it's all fiction or it's all false. even though we do believe that it's largely all fiction and all false. It's revisionist history and so much else. But let's dive into chapter 3. Now we said once we got past chapter 2, we weren't going to go back through and exegete verse by verse. But do we want to at least read the whole chapter, or read sections at a time and then talk about the section?
Sure. We can do that.
All right, so let's do this the first pericope. We'll do Job chapter 3, the first 10 verses. I'll read the first 10, and then you can read the next 10 when we get ready to talk about that. Should I share my screen? Let me see if my system will let me share my screen.
Okay.
My computer is doing some crazy things right now, y'all. Can I close this? What will happen if I do? All right, I'm going to share screen. You should see it in 3, 2, 1. All right. Here we go. After this is Job's friends showed up. They sat there for 7 days in silence. After 7 days of silence, Job Job opened his mouth and cursed the day he was born. Job spoke up and said, "Let the day on which I was born perish, and the night that said, a man has been conceived. That day, let it be darkness. Let not God on high regard it, nor let light shine on it. Let darkness and the deepest shadow claim it. Let a cloud settle on it. Let whatever blackens the day terrify it. That night, let darkness seize it. Let it not be included among the days of the year." Get this date off the calendar. "Let it not enter among the number of months. Indeed, let that night be barren. Let no shout of joy penetrate it. Let those who curse the day curse it. Those who are prepared to rouse Leviathan, let its morning stars be darkened. Let it wait for daylight, but find none, nor let it see the first rays of dawn, because it did not shut the doors of my mother's womb on me, nor did it hide trouble from my eyes."
Mm-hmm.
I almost feel like we can just go ahead and read this whole chapter and talk about it because it's the same theme. What do you think?
I'm game for whatever you want to do.
Let's keep reading, and then we can go back through and just chop up the pericopes.
Okay. Yeah.
You want to take us through the next set?
Sure. I'm actually looking up something. Well, go ahead.
No, I'll read. I'll read. You keep looking at what you're doing. Verse 11. "Why did I not die at birth? And why did I not expire as I came?" We probably should have done a trigger warning, because a lot of the stuff he's saying in this chapter, he's not talking about self-harm or suicide, but he is wishing that he had not been born here. But kind of a post trigger warning. If you're going to be triggered about those kind of thoughts, maybe you want to tune away, because as we begin to talk about this, those are the kinds of things we're going to be discussing. These are the kind of things we're going to be discussing. Why did I not, verse 11, "Why did I not die at birth? Why did I not expire as I came out of the womb? Why did the knees welcome me?" That's an idiom there. "Why were there two breasts that I might nurse at them? For now I would be lying down and would be quiet. I would be asleep and then at peace with the kings or counselors of the earth, who built for themselves places now desolate, or with princes who possessed gold, who filled their palaces with silver. Or why was I not buried like a stillborn infant, like infants who have never seen the light. There, the wicked cease from turmoil. We have a lot of
Mm-hmm.
talk about that there. There, the wicked cease from turmoil, and there the weary are at rest. There, the prisoners
Mm-hmm.
relax together. They do not hear the voice of the oppressor. Small and great are there, and the slave is free from his oppressor. Just a few more verses.
Mm-hmm. I'll read a few
Why?
more if you want.
Yep, go ahead.
Why does God give light to one who is in misery and life to those whose soul is bitter? To those who wait for death that does not come and search for it more than for hidden treasures, who rejoice even to jubilation and are exultant, that is, when they find the grave. So let me read that again. This is all part of the same question. It's poetry. I'm reading
Mm-hmm.
it terribly, but he says basically, why doesn't he give light to those who rejoice even to jubilation and are exultant when they find the grave? Why is light given to a man whose way is hidden and whom God has hedged in? For my sighing comes in place of my food, and my groanings flow forth like water. For the very thing I dreaded has happened to me, and what I feared has come upon me. I have no ease, I have no quietness, I cannot rest. Turmoil has come upon me.
Ah.
Yeah.
So let me just ask this for those in the chat. Is there anybody, and I'm not asking this rhetorically as if there is no answer, but is there anybody who cannot relate to having felt this way? Have you ever felt, damn, it would be better to have never been born if I'm gonna have to deal with this? Do you know that pain? Do you know that angst? Do you know that self-pity of feeling like how I just if I would have known that this was going to be my lot, if I could have chosen to not come to earth, to not have been born, to not exist even, I would have chosen that instead of this. Think about that for a second. Do you know that kind of pain? Jay Witt, you don't even have to talk about it if you don't want to. I've felt this way, and I'm going to talk about it as we get deeper into this. I've had this kind of feeling several times in my life, particularly for two reasons, two very completely different reasons. I've had this feeling, but I'll just ask it. You can wave it off if you don't even want to go into it. Do you know what that's like to feel this way at all?
Well, yeah, I mean, I've had these kinds of almost kind of silly thoughts occasionally, but I think it's just interesting that like he said to not curse God, but this passage
Hmm.
opens up with the fact that he's cursing himself.
Yeah,
So
indeed.
after this, Job opens his mouth, and instead of cursing God, he cursed the day he was born. So he curses himself
Mm,
instead
yeah.
of God. And the irony is here, he has no agency in the day he was born. Like he's he's passive to that. That was something that was inflicted upon him. You understand? Like he was conceived by the act of two parents. He was brought into the
Hmm.
world by other people's actions. Whereas God actually, contrarily, is the person who chose to allow those things to happen. So it's kind of ironic that the person he's cursing is the
Mm,
person who's most passive in regard to what he's going through here, you
mm.
know. But yeah,
That's a great point. The person he's cursing is the active and, dare we say, innocent person here, whereas the person who's responsible for this, he will not curse. And
mm-hmm,
that actually causes me to be very introspective about my own struggles
mm-hmm,
because there's a sense in which one of the times I felt like I wish I had never been born, back when I was a teenager, I acquired some enemies. And
mm-hmm, mm-hmm,
I had no idea that these enemies that I acquired, these people were like not nationally known. This is before the internet, but citywide enemies. I stepped to a kid in Olney, one part of Philadelphia. I was making my way across town and I had people in a whole other part of the city who didn't even know me. I overheard them talking about me and they didn't even know they were talking about me. Yo, you heard about this dude named Brady? He stepped to, and they named the guy I stepped to. And this dude was like known all over the city. He was tapped in, tied into the entire city. So I'm like, I got the whole city now on my head because I was running my mouth against the completely wrong person. And I remember feeling like there's nowhere I can go. Like I'm a target
Hey,
now.
Brady, I have to cynically add that you seem to have a particular talent for running your mouth against people and having yourself cornered. I mean, there was about 10 apologetic videos that went out after his book went out. You've been at this your whole life, apparently.
Well, you called me a provocateur, and I think that's quite yeah.
Yeah,
I,
yeah,
I,
you've
I
been
was
at it your whole life, man.
I was a young instigator. I was an instigator. But here's the thing. I brought that on myself.
Mm-hmm,
I started that trouble that I found myself in, and I
mm-hmm,
found myself wishing I wish I was dead at this point. I mean, they're
mm-hmm.
probably going to kill me anyway. I wish I could just die before they had a chance to do it. Like that. It probably wasn't. I wish I had never been born. It probably just was. I wish I was dead, without them having to
Yeah,
painfully kill me. Um, but that's
yeah,
one side of it. The other side of me wishing I had never been born was there's a video on Ichabod on this channel. I think it's called something like "Was God bad for my health?" or "Was God harmful to my health?" Where I
yeah,
talk
yeah.
about a physical ailment that I've dealt with since I was about 13. And it's one of the most excruciating things that I can think of. I can't imagine. Now, I know that there are people who suffer from all kinds of things. I've had other kinds of pain. I've had back pains, I've had neck pains, I've had all kinds of pains before. But this thing that I suffer from to this day, it's part of my life.
A
It's
thorn in your flesh.
a literal, well, I guess it's figurative, but it feels like a literal thorn in my flesh. Thorns, plural,
Mm-hmm,
in my flesh. It's been so extreme and so bad at times where I found myself pitying myself and wishing I had never been born. But it's
mm,
interesting what you just said, Jay Witt, because very many times, because I was superstitious, and when I say superstitious, I mean religious, because I believed in God, it wasn't just that I was going through these things at that time. Every time I would suffer from it, I would think God's either allowing me to go through this or causing me to go through this. And if he's causing me to go through this, then this is some kind of discipline or chastisement, or he's trying to build character in me. There's some kind of reason for it. Two things, and then I'll let you speak. This, tell me what you think of this. One, I never thought to curse God because it was happening. I only cursed myself. I only thought I wish I had never been born. But I also never, ever, ever allowed myself to think that this could be happening because Satan stirred God up to destroy me with no reason. I never thought that God could just be fucking with me for no reason. I always thought there
mm-hmm,
had to be some kind of reason, because why would I be going through this?
mm-hmm,
So anyway, I say all that to say, I know what it's like to feel like I wish I had never been born. I don't think I ever got close to cursing God. The most I ever, and this is some real shit right here, the most I ever thought, I thought thoughts of suicide. And here's what I thought in my heart when I was thinking those thoughts. It was sort of me trying to sort of passive aggressively show God how serious I was about wanting this suffering to end. I thought I never concocted a plan to harm myself. I never thought how I would do it. I just remember thinking I should just die. And then when I thought that, I sort of like in my soul looked up like, is that enough? Like, is me thinking that enough to make you say, okay, I'll stop hurting him now? Because damn, that's pretty
mm-hmm.
extreme. Like that's how bad it had gotten for me.
Well, this makes me think of. I mean, when you think about what I mean, he says he did it for no reason, right? God said you provoked me basically to do this with no reason, but there was a reason, really, because the reason is it's the vanity of the deity, because the deity is like he's not going to curse me. Like whatever he
Mm,
does, like my name
mm,
is
mm.
unimpeachable.
Yeah,
So actually, if you
yeah.
really think about it, it's just a vanity. This whole thing is about his own vanity, and it makes me think of that Simpsons episode where um, uh, Homer is in some sort of cafeteria and he looks at there's like a table that's turning. It has like cupcakes or something on it,
Yeah.
and he just has a passing thought. I wonder what's making this thing turn around, and like what's making this thing rotate. And then if the camera pans down and you see they're like slaves being whipped down a couple of levels, and
Yeah.
that's what's propelling the thing to turn. And so you have
Yeah.
all this incredible suffering for something so useless as just like a plate that's turning with treats on it. And I'm like, it
Yeah.
just seems apropos to employ that as an illustration for what's going on. For something as frivolous as vanity plates on God's car, he's
Hmm.
allowing, he's allowing Job to go through all of this shit,
Well, there's a more modern example. I don't know if somebody mentioned it on Ichabod in the comments or on Facebook, but on Rick and Morty. I don't know, Jay, but I don't know if you watch Rick and Morty, if you're a fan of it or not. It became
Hmm.
one of my delights this summer. But there's an episode of Rick and Morty where uh, I think there's a device of his that loses power. No, his car battery. His it's not his car battery. His spaceship battery loses power, and he shrinks
Hmm.
himself down to a miniature size to go into this world to figure out why this
Yeah.
world that he made has stopped working, because the only purpose of that world was to produce juice for the battery for his spaceship. And they're
Yeah,
like,
yeah, yeah,
yeah, um, you can go Matrix with it, the whole Matrix, like that's what the
yeah.
whole point of the human beings in the Matrix are. You're powering your
Hmm.
batteries for our AI existence.
Yeah.
Anyway.
But no, I mean the illustrations are they're plenteous, because if you
Mm,
think about, like, we have this in real life. We have farms full of endless suffering for sentient creatures like
mm.
cows and chickens, and it's like at the end of the day it's so that you can have like a McChicken or something, like it's like something that you would eat in 4 minutes and it's all over,
Damn,
but like
that's
this animal
crazy.
is
Think about that.
this animal is yeah, it's very true. This animal has gone through much misery, being pumped with antibiotics, dealing with infections and whatever else they have to deal with, the lack of light and just misery for its entire existence from birth until it's slaughtered, only so you can eat this thing in 2-3 minutes
Well,
and
no,
then throw the wrapper
and
out.
add to what you just talked about. It's not just the misery of being fenced in, the misery of being corralled, and the misery of being slaughtered, and the misery of the infections that they would get. They also have relational ties to other animals,
Yeah,
and so
absolutely.
it's not
Children
right.
has got, or chicks.
They've got the physical, they've got the mental, and they've got emotional stress. And like you said,
Hmm.
just so that you can have a McChicken that you're going to eat in 4 minutes and never think about, like,
Yes,
that's
yes.
that's insane.
And the parallel to the book of Job couldn't be more apropos, because it's
Yeah.
like this is all for God's car's vanity plates. So
Mm,
he can say, yeah, this dude didn't curse my name. Like,
mm.
granted, it's not
Yeah.
that cursing his name is going to have any real consequence, other than the
Right.
fact that this guy was like, yo, F God or whatever.
Right.
Like that's all it is. It's just an utterance. And it's like, yeah,
Well, I'm thinking cross-reference that to Genesis, right? So what if you curse God's name? You don't have the power to create with your words. So you cursing God is not going to,
yeah,
like you said, it's not going to do anything. But then
yeah.
go back to Genesis. The man has
Hmm.
become like one of us.
Yeah.
Now, lest he put forth his hand and take from the tree of life and live forever. Now, remember, we go back a couple
Yeah.
of years ago on this channel, you had an epiphany because I was talking about these Elohim. They seem to be concerned and worried that, oh shit, the man has become like one of us, knowing good and evil. That's a
Hmm.
godly attribute that we didn't want them to have. Now, if they get the other godly attribute, immortality, it's almost as if God is the Elohim are afraid that they're not going to be able to do anything about man's ascension if man gets knowledge of good and evil and immortality. And you were sort of like astounded by the fact that the verse cuts off, lest he put forth his hand and take from the tree of life and live forever. You said dot, dot, dot. It's like those dots were the dust of Yahweh's feet running to go stop him from getting to the tree of life.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. Let's hurry up and end this, like, before this actually happens. Yeah.
But it's almost like, in a sense, wait, can man harm God? Why was Elohim so concerned that man not be able to get to the tree of life? Well, okay, you can do whatever you want to do with that. But now here we are in Job. Why the fuck does Elohim or Yahweh here care whether the man curses him? He can't harm you.
Yeah, well, just think about the words of people that matter to you. The ones that sting the most are the words that come from people who have some ability to affect you or are very close to you. Like, you think about that. I think of Mike Tyson recently. He did an interview with a little kid that went viral. And
yes.
The whole point, the point he's making when he's talking about legacy is, who gives an F about what people are thinking about me when I can't be around to know that they're thinking this about me, right? So the idea is the weight of the words only has some sort of coordinate weight in terms of its importance to me that has to do with how much I value or have the ability to value it. Now, if you think about a deity that supposed to have created everything, there are people who can, like, when you look at online trolls that are anonymous and they might say the most hurtful or horrible things, it rolls off of your back because it's just an anonymous, it's just somebody saying something out there. Now, if what Jonathan Edwards describes as the chasm between God's infinitude and our finitude and the greatness of his being and all of its metaphysical grandeur compared to us and our dust likeness, if the chasm is as great and infinite as they say it, how is it that a statement from us could even matter to his ego? You have to ask yourself that the ego is there is a direct correlation between how much something matters to you and how much and the person that's uttering it. If Jonathan Edwards describes us, like what even Isaiah says, we're like grasshoppers. The Lord sits enthroned above the circle of the earth, and all we are like grass. Well, if we are like grasshoppers, have you ever stopped to think about what a grasshopper thinks about you?
What is man that you are mindful of him?
Exactly.
What is man that you are mindful of him? And yet here you are concerned that he not curse you. But here's the thing, though. If this is not, because you have one or two choices. This is really a God who cares that much that a man not curse him. Yeah. Or this entire story was written to warn human beings not to curse God, not because it would hurt God, but because it would hurt, you know what? Because it would hurt the system of the religion. I've got to write something to get you all not to doubt, not to cast aspersions, not to think ill of this system of religion. If I can do that, then it makes sense why someone would care that you not curse the deity. And so it almost shows you, it's almost like tipping their hand and showing their cards of what they're really trying to get you to not do. A God would not care whether you curse it. A priest would care. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
I think about, I just say this last thing. I won't name any names, but there's a person that you and I both know. And this person was trying to get you not to participate in this podcast with me. And one of the things that this person said to you was like, oh, I probably shouldn't say this. I shouldn't say it because it's too, yeah. I was, as I was setting it up, I was thinking about the ways that it could do more than we wanted to do.
Well, one of the things about us acknowledging that there isn't any being that's omniscient is we have the ability to pull out before we ruin our lives. He's the pull-out king. Yes, sir. Yes, sir. Yeah,
That
but
was a good, yeah.
no, man. Yeah, no. But we really don't typically value people's word about us. It's proportionate to how bad, like it's basically proportionate. We don't worry about insects. And believe me, insects think. Like all you have to do is chase. I'll never forget. At one point, I was chasing this one insect, and I could very much see it was a contest of minds going on. Like this insect was definitely thinking counter to what I was doing. But how often? It's only in the act of trying to kill the insect that I even care what the insect is thinking. It just doesn't even occur to me. And if you're trying to tell me, if you're telling me that there's a chasm that's greater than that between me and that insect, between me and the deity, then it just doesn't make sense that he's actually concentrating on anything that I think, it just doesn't make any sense. And like you said, it might ruin your ideology. And if that's the case, then it's very precious what you're thinking. Because it's so important that your thoughts, you have orthodoxy and heterodoxy. It all comes back to orthodoxy and heterodoxy. That's what we're talking about at the beginning of what does orthodoxy and heterodoxy protect? It protects our ideology. So all of those end with ologies. At the end, it ends with the theology, which is the science. It's the science of explaining what is going on in the world. So your orthodoxy and heterodoxy, they serve as a way of hedging in your ideology. If you lose categories of orthodoxy and heterodox thought, what ends up happening is you don't have the scaffolding for an ideology. And an ideology is only important when you feel like it's your duty to explain the phenomena that's in front of you in every aspect of life.
Yeah. For anybody who's maybe getting lost in the terminology, orthodoxy is right belief about whatever the system of belief is. Heterodoxy is you're on the other side. You're on the wrong side of the way that we're saying this belief should actually be rolled out. And so you need those terms, just like we talked about at the beginning, these non-essentials, right? You need those terms. You need all these terms to protect the belief. You don't need those kind of terms to protect truth. Truth is what it is. But once you create a story, so I talk about this a lot on this channel. When you envision that the stars twinkling up above and shooting across the sky and the thunder that you hear and the lightning that you see, when you envision that the activity in the sky means there are actors in the sky. That's step one of religion. Step two, to start telling stories about what those actors are doing when they're not twinkling and shooting and lightning and thundering. You start imagining stories for these, and then you start applying those stories to how they apply to your life. They're the ones who bless you with rain and sunshine, and you start telling stories about the things you see in the sky. Well, then when those stories start running up against real life, well, in the story you said, if I did this, it would rain. I did it and it didn't rain. Well, now you need ideology. Now you need story to explain why the deities or why the actors in the sky are not doing the things that the stories said they would. And this is sort of what Job and the system of religion is doing, is the stories aren't panning out. You told me keep these laws. You told me do this. You told me do that. And it's not working. Well, then why? And so now you've got to tell more stories. You tell one lie, now you got to tell another. Well, now you got to tell more stories to cover up why it's not panning out, as opposed to just dealing with the cold, hard facts of life. If you're dealing with the cold, hard facts of life, then you don't need ideology. You say, I don't know why there's a rainbow. Before we had the ability to know what the prism of lights are, I don't know. It's a cold, hard fact of life. Instead of doing that, no, you tell a story.
Yeah. Well, I see this. We see this on a popular level on TikTok and all of these social media. You'll see somebody doing something that's just bugged out, or it may represent some sort of imbalance in the person. They'll say, "Oh, he's a Gemini." This is ideology. It's actually tied to what you just were describing, the stars or whatever. You're trying to explain the fact that this person is bipolar or whatever in light of astrology, essentially, which is not that's straightforward ideology. That's what that is.
And then you have somebody like Neil deGrasse Tyson who will explain to you, but the stars are not even where they once were when people came up with these. Like what you're looking at now is not what they were looking at when they first came up with these astrological signs. And so you've sort of got to do some things that shift around to figure out if you were a Cancer back in 2000 AD, 2000 BC, well, now that person is going to be a different sign because those stars have shifted. You don't pay attention to that because that runs afoul of your ideology. You need to explain your actions by, I'm a Cancer, so I'm going to da 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 da. Well, no, actually, you're a Sagittarius now because you know what I mean? Like,
what is and ask yourself when the person just dismissed and said, oh, this is a Cancer or a Gemini, what's more likely, that it's related to like something that's billions of light years away from you, or the fact that your mother was abusive, or the fact that that you got your hand slapped every time you reach for kids? Like, what is more likely, that there's something we could actually trace in your real life as this being resultant from that, or that something that is as unrelated to, you got the tides and the moon. I mean, you can, give me a break.
Yeah.
Like, it's, what are we doing? But it's the same thing. It's the book of Job. It's the same thing. It's like, okay, long as he doesn't curse God, our ideology remains in place, then we can say that, and then that's what actually, if we go to the next chapter, if you want to, it leads us in the next chapter, because what ends up happening, at least when I was reading through 3 and 4 and 5, it was just basically competing ideologies. That's why I started noticing. It's like, go ahead.
Yeah. I was gonna say, I'm thinking because we're an hour into this, and there's a few more points I want to talk about in Job 3. And because I guess we had such a pre-roll of this episode, just the conversation that we had, we're probably going to save 4 and 5 for next time.
Okay. Yes. Good. That's good. That's good.
But you're right. You said competing ideologies. Here's why we think these things are happening. Well, here's why I think these things are happening. And this is what we, as opposed to, like I said, just embracing the cold, hard facts of life. And this is something I talk to theists about all the time. Often theists will say, they won't say this is the only reason they believe, but they will say one of the benefits of believing is it's comforting to think that when I go through X, Y, or Z, I've got a heavenly Father who cares and who can comfort and who can heal and who's got a purpose for this and that. It's comforting. And I say to them, okay, if we're going to use our comfort as the, hey, let me just run with this because of the practicality of it. Well, for the non-theist, maybe the theist should consider, for us, we find comfort in saying, oh, so there's not a divine being who's intentionally hurting me this way. This is just how life has shaped out. What if it's more comforting to think this is just a cold, hard fact of the universe, that life is hard, that these things can happen? That's more comforting than having to think that there's a divine person who said, oh, you're looking for somebody to fuck with? Go fuck with her. Go fuck with him. That's not comforting to me. So if that's what we're using as our, hey, just let me run with this, it's comforting for me to not have to try to figure out why someone would want me to suffer this way and be okay with it.
And I think it's helpful for us to note that for all, I know how like some atheists will say, we are doing exactly what the Christians are doing with every other God. We just take it one step further and just eliminate the Christian deity. Well, it's also important to note that we're quite capable of not having these huge existential questions when, let's just use Chick-fil-A as an example, since it's owned by Christians. When you go to Chick-fil-A, instead of McDonald's, and you get your chicken sandwich there, you're quite capable of not thinking about the chicken you're eating existentially and thinking about what's the reason for it being born in abject misery only so that you can eat a sandwich on a Saturday night. Like you don't have those conversations. You're happy to have the pickled chicken sandwich and keep it moving. So in other words, just like the atheist is just going one step further and eliminating the Christian God, you're already able to function without having to have answers to those questions. You're just able to enjoy your chicken sandwich and keep it moving. You know what? Since you've exhibited that capability when you go to Chick-fil-A or McDonald's and get the McChicken, you could go that extra step
Yeah.
and just live your life and not
Yeah.
need to have those answers for the existential questions for your life. You have just chosen to
Mm.
prioritize your life. And like Job and his narcissism talking about, let's just curse the entire day that I was born. Well, wait a second, that's a bit narcissistic.
Other
A
people
lot
were
of
born on that day.
there was a lot of other important shit going on that day. Like if we get rid of that day, we have a lot of other huge problems in this solar system, right? Like
Yeah.
we can't just eliminate that day. It's not like Joshua where you can make the sun stand still, right? We can't do that.
Yeah. Yeah. Excellent. There's something else that stood out to me in the second pericope here, um, where he says, "If I had never been born," let's go down to verse. Let me put it back on the screen. Here it comes. I think it's verse. I'll start at verse 14. He's
Okay.
basically saying, if I had never been born, I would be asleep and then at peace with the
Mm-hmm.
kings and counselors of the earth. So this tells you how they thought about death in the Old Testament. I would be
Mm-hmm.
at peace with the kings of the earth, kings and counselors of the earth who built for themselves places that are now desolate, with the princes who possess gold, who filled their palaces. Verse 16. Or why was I not buried like a stillborn infant, like infants who have never seen the light? Then verse 17 is what I wanted to get into. There the wicked cease from turmoil, and there the weary are at rest. There the prisoners relax together.
Mm-hmm.
They do not hear the voice of the oppressor. Small and great are there, and the slave is free from his master. This is a window into, at least for this author, for these
The
people,
great equalizer.
right? Death was the great equalizer. There was no the righteous dead go here, the wicked dead go here. No, in this day and time, and in their thinking, when you die, you are dead and you are all in the same boat at that point. And this is a window into
Mm-hmm.
the what Christians would call the progressive revelation, but what the deconstructionist, the deconvert, the critical scholar would look and say, no, this is not progressive revelation. This is the evolution of religion. Before you guys ran into people that had a different conception of what happens after death, you all thought death was okay, then we're no more at that point. You ran into people that thought there's an afterlife and their theology changes. That's evolution, not progression. God was not progressively revealing what happens after death. No, the people changed their opinion about what happened after death. That's evolution of religion.
Yeah, and I guess obviously this is some of it seems like control would be the only reason to add in the extra elements because it's like, well, if we all end up in the same place, how much you have individuals where they're powerful or they can't be, I mean, we think of our government, we think of checks and balances, but in the ancient world, there often weren't checks and balances. So if you just
Mm.
happen to just by accident of where you were born, be in a position of power, there was nothing to really bridle your avarice or whatever. In fact, there are examples of it in the text where, King Ahab wants someone's vineyard and he just, all right, I just have the guy killed
Mm.
and take his vineyard, right? Oh,
Yeah.
well, how do you bridle people's behaviors in situations where there's nothing else? Well, if you can, they all end up in the same place. That's hardly a way to keep a person from behaving a certain way.
Yeah.
But if somehow you can say, well, there's going to be a day of reckoning that's
Mm.
going to come, and you're going to have to. You can see how this could also be used as a system to control people's behavior.
Mm.
To tell them, well, you don't want to do that because this will happen.
Yeah.
And then the ideologies even they get further expanded. I just think about ideologies almost like a evolutionary tree where you have like the seed or something, and then next thing you know, it just keeps branching out, right?
Mm.
And it serves all of these other functions. Like you say, the thing evolves. It's like,
Mm.
all right. Initially, they thought they all just died. And
Hmm.
then I guess at some point, somebody saw the utility in saying, well, you don't all just go to the same place. Maybe some people get are going to be tormented, right?
Yeah.
And then that gets more and more elaborate. And it gets so elaborate that now there's no consensus on what happens after you die, right?
Hmm.
Like among Christians, there's absolutely no consensus, right?
Yeah.
Some of
Yeah.
them think, you're in the bosom of Abraham. Others think, oh, you know.
Yeah. You got universalists, you got annihilationists, there's all kinds of like
Mm,
some of the most important questions that the religion claims to answer. You've got no
mm-hmm,
consensus on those answers. So then what good is it really?
mm. Is consensus? I guess that's a question for the audience too. Um, we don't have consensus, but if we did have consensus, would that be better for the religion? That's another thought. Like, would it
Yes
be
and
better if
no.
there was
Yes and
consensus?
no. Yes, it would be better for the religion in that it would demonstrate a unity that Jesus was supposedly prayed for his disciples, right? Um, pray that they would be one, Father, as you and I are one. So the unity would, eh, even if it's not a strong case for the religion, it would take one of the
Yeah.
marks against the religion away.
Hmm. Hmm.
But the reason why it's a weakness is because if you're unified on something that is sort of comical, or we now know that that's kind of BS, if you're unified
Hmm.
on something you need the non-falsifiability of it. Once you
Hmm.
unify on it, this was something I was planning for a future video, but I guess I'll say it now. It's almost like when police tell people when they arrest them, like you have the right to remain silent, right? That right to remain silent is protecting your rights against self-incrimination. So you don't
Hmm.
speak until there's a lawyer present, somebody who can tell you all your rights. If you speak too soon, you may incriminate yourself in ways that you wouldn't if you had counsel. Well, in the same way, if the religion was able to unify on a certain idea, it almost would be like them speaking too soon. Up. You said such and such. And once we can
Yeah.
disprove that, we've got you. But as long as you've
Or
got
it's
10,
like the
10 different
person,
views, we can't really hold
yeah,
anybody's feet to the fire on it.
it's like the group being chased by the shooter, and they say, well, it's best for us to run in separate directions because at least he can't kill us all if
Right.
we're all running in. He
Right.
only has one gun, right?
Yeah.
So it's like, I'm going to run here, you're going to go there, and at least 3 or 4 of us are going to
Right.
get away.
They might get 2 or 3 of us, but they're not going to get us all. Yeah. That's sort of how
they'll get the literalists.
right. Exactly.
They'll get the literalists on
Exactly.
Genesis, but us who think of it as allegorical or whatever, we're going to get away over here. And in doing that, there will always be a way to say, well, you didn't get those guys over there.
Exactly.
You only have one gun of truth.
Perfect. Perfect. One last thought on this. So Job is saying, I wish I had never been born. Um,
Mm-hmm.
there's something, and this isn't even the Bible's response. The Bible is not, no, Job, you should never have been born. The book of
Mm-hmm.
Job's response is, in the end, you're going to be doubly blessed. So forget those,
Yeah.
fuck those kids. We're going to give you new
Yeah.
ones.
I was talking to Albert about how ridiculous that was. Good grief. If nothing points to the man-made origin of it, is a God who thinks that's a good idea. It's like, yeah, all right, I gave you better looking kids than, are you serious? Like he says it. They were better looking. Like, really?
Yeah. But
Like that is, yo, Brady, that doesn't even work for a dog, right? If you have a dog you love, right?
yeah,
And
yeah.
it's of a particular breed, and then that dog dies. If somebody came that day, it's like, all right, I got the same breed dog, and look, it's got a healthier coat. You're not going to be like, okay, like that's not, it doesn't work. You have a relationship with that dog, right? It's like, it's so oblivious to that. I don't know. It just seems so puerile. It's so bad. Anyway, I'm sorry. That was
No. It's all good. But suppose somebody were to come and say, no, Job, you don't need to take this extreme measure because at least you had
yeah.
kids. Like, at least you were able to have that experience. is there a sense in which it's better to have loved and lost than to have never loved at all? It's better to have
Hmm.
lived and lost than to have never lived at all. Like, is that true in
Hmm.
any sense? Um,
Hmm.
could Job have taken any comfort from, yeah, I'm covered in boils now, and yeah, I'm poor now, but at least I had all that. Um, I don't know. I don't know if that question is even worth considering, but I guess it just made me wonder, is that I wish I was never born? Is that a is that a real solution to the suffering to have never had it? Or is there something to saying, hey, at least I had it, at least I experienced it one time in my life?
Hmm. Yeah, and I'm sure there's this is probably true of most human beings. If you live long enough and you eventually obviously will die, there will come a point where death is probably sweeter than life for most
Mm,
people who will live long enough. I'm assuming that that happens after you get to a certain point.
mm,
Even if it's only because you've outlived every significant relationship. So let's say you end up being the oldest person on the planet and you've outlived everybody that was a peer to you. So
mm,
now you have no peers. And now you're more or less incapacitated. You're infant like. Um, there's a sense in which there's probably a sweetness in eventually seeing that a day where it ends, where
mm,
you're no longer in this isolated situation. Although you're probably enjoying certain things like a sunny day and relative health, yeah, seeing an ending of it might seem sweet to you eventually. So there's a sense in which the words that he puts into Job's mouth are words that I'm
mm,
assuming a lot of people experience at some point in their life.
mm,
Probably toward the end of it, often, if it gets bad enough.
mm,
It's like relief can. I mean, there was recently. I don't know if you saw in the news. There was I think it was somewhere in Scandinavia. May have been. I think it was in Scandinavia where there was an individual who used a suicide basically machine. It was the
mm.
first time it had been used. I think they ended up arresting the people who orchestrated the suicide. But it was um, basically euthanasia, essentially. I mean, but
Mhm.
it's suicide. The person
Mm,
is able to get into this thing and violent. And that says a lot about our society that we don't want to give people that agency
mm,
to at the end when they feel like it's over. And I guess it's a slippery slope because I guess it does leave windows open for people to say to actually take you out and say
yeah.
you want it to be taken out. And I think that's probably the most fearful thing about it, right? Giving people the agency to do that because you can't actually testify that you didn't want to get taken out if somebody you're gonna rely on somebody after you take yourself out to relay that this was volitional, right?
Mm,
So if they open that door, it's a can of worms for sure. Because
yeah.
who's to say that somebody doesn't sign off on something for
Yeah.
you and then they take you out, right? So
Mm,
I get it. I get why it's been such a hard thing for us to settle on. But I think there's also this idea that we talk about the Hippocratic Oath and all those kinds of things that the intrinsic value, I guess, that we seem to perceive there being in life. And even if it's an
mm,
unanswerable question, for at least for humans, we seem to feel like there's some sort of intrinsic value of being alive, even if it's a state of really abject misery. When
mm,
you think about
yeah.
the woman who was attacked by the chimp that time and basically lost her face,
Mm,
the chimp ate her face off.
mm,
And then doctors go through the trouble. So she doesn't have a tongue, she has no eyes, no nose. I mean,
mm,
essentially, her experience of life is extremely impaired. But then they go through all these innumerable like operations to restore some facsimile of a face to her, even
mm,
though it's devoid of any of the things that we need to actually
mm,
experience, like taste and sight, and it just shows you the kind of value we invest
mm,
being around, even if you're just like a floating head, right?
mm.
Isn't that interesting?
Yeah.
This is
Yeah.
a bit of a stream of
No,
consciousness, but
no,
yeah.
it's all good because I think what this book does, I don't know about inadvertently or intentionally, is it does bring up those existential questions of what good is it? What good is it in
Hmm.
being here if I can't be here the way that I want to be here or be here with the
Mm-hmm.
people that I want to be here with, it brings up those kinds of questions. There's a thought that
Mm.
I'm going to chase. I have an episode coming. I don't, should I say, I'm going to say it. There's a thought that I'm going to chase.
Mm-hmm.
If for the people who are looking forward to going to heaven, suppose you end
Mm-hmm.
up in heaven,
Mm-hmm.
and for whatever reason, if you ever get to the point where you decide, you know what, I think I'm good. Like I don't like I don't
You have a suicide machine.
like if you ever got to the point in heaven where you thought to yourself, I've had enough. Like I'm cool. The option to not
Yeah,
exist
yeah,
in heaven.
yeah.
Or, like you
No.
said, in the same way that we invest just being here, so that we're going to try to keep people around, even if they don't want to be here. You cannot commit suicide. We're not even going to allow people to assist you. And is God going to do that with people in quote unquote the afterlife? Or even if you feel like you want to check out, you can't because
Yeah.
He's going to put that same kind of demand on your life that we put on the lives of people who want
What is it?
to.
The cherubim at the Garden of Eden or something. He's going to have them go. Hey, ushers, go to the doors. Keep the doors. Nobody gets out of here. Right? Lock all the doors. You're now a hostage in eternal life. Right? No, that is something to be said. Right?
Yeah, yeah. Yo, hey, so let's
Hey,
okay,
there's the last thought that I have.
okay.
There is nothing to incite boredom like
Mm,
eternal bliss too.
mm.
Like some of the most, I mean, you think about Diddy and people say, why would a man get involved in such debauchery? It's because he was endlessly bored. Like, what do you do as a billionaire? Like, you have to
It's like they
keep.
say, what do you buy the man who has nothing, who has everything, right? You've got everything. What are you going to get him? You start having to come up with crazy
Yeah.
shit because
And
what's
so,
going to do it for you?
yeah, it's like, okay, well, I guess I'll have crazy parties and video myself. And he's like, oh, well, that doesn't do it. Now I'm going to have to do this. Like, yeah, like you save a person eternally, then you eternally, like, not only do they have,
Mm,
they're endlessly fed, so they don't have to work for their food. They're never going to be hungered. Like,
mm.
this sounds like a nightmare, sir. This is like a Twilight Zone episode. Eventually, this, like, what you thought was bliss turns into a prison because it's like, all right, I can't kill myself. Like, I can't kill myself because I have eternal life and I'm never going to be hungry. So I don't ever have to really seek food.
Mm,
Like, for any, like, some people, like
mm,
the struggle. I was listening to, was it ASAP Ferg?
mm,
Talking about how like wealthy people, he was in an interview and he was saying how like these really rich people are the most like non-swag having people and most bored people you can imagine. Like they have
mm.
no, they have to leech off of, because something about the hunger and the struggle that
Mm.
keeps you sort of
Right,
in
right.
life,
Yeah.
right? So once you get it all, right? Go ahead. I'm sorry.
Well, somebody could say, are we now not contradicting ourselves? Because if if the thing that makes life meaningful or beautiful is the struggle, is the adversity,
Mm-hmm.
is the getting and then maybe losing, is the not having and then having, and then if that's what makes life tick, and maybe God did Job a favor by putting him through
Mm-hmm.
all this, because otherwise,
Yeah.
Job would have been that person that ASAP Ferg is talking about, where you've got
Yeah.
everything and you're like, oh shit, I just remembered. There was one more thing in this passage that is it worth bringing up. Remember in chapter 1, Job was making sacrifices for his kids, lest any of them had done something to inadvertently piss God off. Job is making these sacrifices just in case. And then at the end of chapter
Mm-hmm.
2, I took it down so I can't even tell you what verse it is. At the end of chapter 3, Job says, the thing I feared has come upon me. The thing that I was trying to
Yeah.
prevent,
Yeah.
I was trying to prevent all this, and it happened to me anyway. I wanted to try to draw something out of that, but maybe I don't know. Uh, I just feel like that was
Yeah.
important for Job to, like. I don't know whether it's for Job's sake or for the reader's sake. It's that ideology of the thing you were trying your hardest to prevent still ended up happening. What do you
Yeah.
do? Anyway, there's two
I
thoughts there.
get.
Is that go ahead?
Yeah, the question of what the thing is like, is the thing the reference to losing all of his kids and all and his cattle, or is it a reference to him losing
His health.
his health, or is the answer yes? It's both of those things.
Right.
Like, is it like, I mean, what is the thing that he's even referring to there? But it is something to be said. Like, yeah, like this is. He's essentially like Job is essentially living in somewhat of a paradise on earth, and that's apropos because apparently they didn't have a belief in a robust afterlife. So he was actually experiencing the effects of righteousness right here on the earth, and he had essentially a bliss-like, heaven-like existence.
Oh, that's a great point, Jay Witt. Because they did not have a view of the afterlife, one of the reasons why it mattered that you were righteous is because whatever heaven you're going to have, you're going to get it here.
Yeah.
And Job was experiencing that. So Job's only heaven has been turned into hell. His only heaven has been turned into hell. What do you do?
And the only escape he has, the only escape that the person who doesn't believe in an afterlife has from hell is to die, which is, they're telling us now, is when hell begins. That's the irony. He's like, my life is hell. It reminds me of the Nation of Islam, where they say hell isn't some preternatural kind of place or something. Hell is is where you live right now in the ghetto, and so forth. And as much as I could co-sign the NOI, it would be maybe in that sense that, like, hey, make where you live now what you need it to be.
Yeah.
That's probably as far as I could go with the cosigns. There seems to be something sensible about, even, I don't care whatever their mythology is, but telling people to focus on trying to make grocery stores in your neighborhood where you're not in a food desert. Make restaurants where you get healthy food. Become tailors, make your own suits, have your own farms, and grow your own vegetables free of all of the pesticides and all. I mean, whenever I've seen that kind of ideology in any kind of belief system, it's like, all right, that makes sense because it's based here in the real world. Now, the other mythology, to hell with that, you know what I mean?
Literally. So hold on, let's go back. Last thing, answer the question I was trying to pose there, just for the thought experiment. Is God, if life is about, the achieving, the overcoming the adversities, the struggle makes it more meaningful and even beautiful and all that, has God done Job a favor by making him suffer? Because somebody would say that's part of the point of the book of Job is Job didn't really know God until he was able to see God in his sovereignty cannot be.
As soon as you started saying this, I thought about Rocky, the movie Rocky, if anybody's ever watched those. And the greatest ones were maybe the first two, right? And that's when he was on his rise. And why? Because he was like a regular, like, everybody likes the underdog story because you're still a human being or something there. Like, he's still meeting the love of his life, working in the pet store, and he has nothing. He's living in his like crummy apartment. And as he's getting things, you're able to like be excited about him rising to the top. And it is like, and in the end, he's kind of like Tyson was recently, right? Like all of the drive, they have to try to reinvest drive into him via this existential threat to him, which is this Russian fighter or whatever, right? It was like a Russian fighter. It was like the Cold War or whatever. But it's like, you're trying to recreate, because you don't have an underdog story once he's got all of the wealth and he's got the huge mansion and he's got all of the cars and stuff. It's not an interesting movie. So how do you, now you have to enter in the existential threat. So it's like, for Job, how do you draw us into the story of Job if he just stays there,
right?
And the ideology works the way it's supposed to work, where he offers a sacrifice. It's just like he lives happily forever ever after. It ends up being Paradiso of Dante. Most people don't even know that Dante wrote the Paradiso. Most people only know about the Inferno, because the Inferno is where the suffering happens, right?
Right. Yeah.
So if you think about Job, you don't have the poetry of Job. You don't have all of his friends offering every possible iteration of an ideology that there is. so that you can milk like Christians, by the way, that passage you focused in on, the wicked shall cease from troubling and the weary shall be at rest. Christians have gathered that verse and used it repeatedly through the ages, even though it's in the mouth of one of the detractors. It's actually not orthodox, because at that point,
no, that's Job. That's Job saying that at that point.
Job saying that. Yes, Job is saying that. I'm sorry. But it's still Job. Job gets silenced by God. I'm sorry. He gets silenced by God later in the book, and even his perspective is off because he's like I would. But I guess they would say, well, in that particular passage, he wasn't off because in some sense, even the Christian, even though the Christian believes that there is life beyond the grave, they believe that the wicked will cease from being able to engage in their wickedness, and the weary will get their relief from. So they see that as foreshadowing or prophetic of what's going to happen in the future. But you don't get, my whole point was, you don't get those, the beauty of that poetry, which I'll acknowledge. There is some beauty in that. See, I know I'll probably get a lot of hate in the comments because some people really hate the book of Job. But even as I was reading through this chapter in preparation, I was like, there's some beautifully said passages here. Like there's some poetic stuff going on here. And
it reflects some real emotion that you're going to experience in life, and it does it well.
Yeah, and I think they're genuinely. I was at first I was intent on just like dismissing this whole book as it's just a whole heap of rubbish. But as I was reading through the poetic passages, as we started getting into this, I started realizing it's one of the more poetic books, and it has parallels to Ecclesiastes to some degree, right?
Yeah, another book that we should tackle that at some point.
Yeah, and it does tap into the dilemma of being a human being and living here and knowing kind of like you don't get big answers sometimes. And it says that really well at times. So at first, I remember you mentioning that we would probably find a lot of sympathy for the sentiments of Job's friends. But I'm finding even in Job's own mouth, things that are coming out that I'm like, And maybe this will be my last thought. I know this is a long rant, but perhaps Job is a vehicle for this ancient Israelite to just, like Ecclesiastes, to have a like naturalistic or humanistic rant. You know what I mean? Like I can't get this off in a certain orthodoxy, but if I put it in the mouth of the protagonist of the story,
exactly,
then I get that off. Like you know what I mean?
Because you're creating characters, you can create, and this is the thing about the multifaceted nature of going through life and having these different experiences. You're going to have highs, you're going to have mids, you're going to have lows, you're going to have thoughts, you're going to have theses, you're going to have antithesis. You're going to try to come to some sort of synthesis in the middle. But if you can create a story where you've got different characters, you can put all that multifaceted perspective in the mouths of different characters. And even though you have a God character come and try to put Job in his place, at least you got those counter thoughts from the perspective of a Job. At least you got those off. You know what I mean? And so
Go ahead.
Go ahead.
This is rich. Rich. No, I was just thinking about the prohibition against the creation of idols and imagery in Islam and how it led to the beautiful architecture and the beautiful rugs. And they'll take foliage and just make these beautiful paths. It's like sidewalks that are cement where you can't stop that human element, that humanism. You can't stop. Like the sidewalk is laid over nature, and then you see grass growing in the cracks of the sidewalk. You can try to make me function within this strict ideology where I can't curse God, but I can sort of curse him on the low through a character in my story. So I'll use literature to get at something that I can't get at in the system. And like, I do believe that writers are like Ecclesiastes and Job, like this is their humanistic window of relief. This is the crack in the sidewalk. This is
what the arts have always been for. The arts have always given people an outlet to go against the authority, whether it be politics or whether it be religion, to say something outside the system. It would be very interesting. We can't know, but maybe to an extent, to a degree, that is what's going on here. Is I have to make it look like God still wins, But the reason why this book
Yeah.
stands out over the millennia is because even though the
Hmm.
God is still sovereign in the story, at least the human beings got their thing off. They got a chance to talk
Yeah.
back.
He
You know
got
what I
to
mean?
say it. Yeah, he got
Yeah,
to say it. And even if he didn't say it, his friend said it. So I create like a plethora of, like,
right,
I just create a conversation where humans, we are not going to be under the thumb of this deity. We're going to
right.
get it off, even if we're smart enough to kind of, it's
Yeah.
like God is like in Islam, God prevents you from creating idols. Oh yeah, I can't create idols. All right, I'm gonna give you the most ornate rugs and mosque and masjids that you've
Yeah.
ever that's ever been seen, like the Taj Mahal, right?
My
Like this is
cousin.
the most ornate.
Yeah. I'm sorry. Go ahead. Go ahead. I see the point you're making, and
No,
it
go
brought me
ahead.
to
That's
another
done.
point.
I'm done. Yeah.
My cousin tells a story about when he was younger. Uh, he there was a guy who wanted to fight him, but the guy had all his friends with him. They were like right there. So he told the guy, "Yo, I ain't gonna fight you in front of all them because I know y'all gonna jump me. Come around here. Come around the
Yeah.
corner." So they got around
Hmm.
the corner, and my cousin says he's trashing the dude. But as soon as he sees the guy's friends coming around the corner, he pulled the guy and fell and put the guy on top of him to make it look like the guy was actually winning, so that his friends wouldn't think they needed to jump
Yeah.
in and
Yeah.
jump
Yeah.
him. And sort of
Yeah.
what Job is doing here is like, or the writer is doing here is, we don't know, but I'd like to think
Yeah.
what you're
Yeah.
saying. The
Yeah.
writer is
Yeah.
going to, at the end, he's going to turn and put God back on top to make God win. When
Yeah.
really,
Yeah. Yeah.
he
Yeah.
was. If
It's
you
like
guys
I
catch
was
what's
like,
going
but
on there.
in all this, he didn't curse God, but he actually gets it off in the book.
Yeah.
That's crazy, right? Is it? Wouldn't it be crazy if that's
Yeah.
like? And I don't put it past the ingenuity of human beings. Like if you're
Yeah, for
living in these
sure.
closed systems where you can't do X, Y, and Z,
Yeah.
you're going to find a way to get it off as a human. It's like,
Hmm.
all right. And what an interesting way to do it. Just put together this fictive story and then just have all of these characters.
Yeah.
Like this is giving me so many ideas for
Yeah.
ways I might even approach counter apologetics. Like,
Mm.
what if instead of it just being the character of Jay Witt, I'm able to like address different facets of the
Mm.
Christian argument using fictive characters
Yeah.
to address them. Like this is anyway, my brain is going crazy
Yeah.
right now.
Good stuff.
This is
Yeah.
great.
Good
Yeah, this
stuff.
is fun.
Hey, let me
Yeah.
give a shout out to Thurgood. Thank you for your support. We appreciate you, yo. JL Keys, Marissa Nato, Michael Shannon, San, John Geyer, Tristan Harris, Maurice Wheatley, Cheesy with the Z, EF. We appreciate our Patreon supporters. If you're not a Patreon supporter, please go and join the Patreon. I said this before, just like Jay Witt is going to be beefing up the content on his channel. As soon as I'm done with this audio book, there's light in the tunnel, guys. I'm coming to the end of this process. Once I'm done with that, I plan to actually start beefing up this channel with a lot more content, think pieces that um, I've been strategizing ways to put
Should we
together and present
preview?
it. What do you mean?
Remember we said we were
Oh
going
yeah,
to
yeah,
come
yeah, yeah,
together
yeah,
and
for
do.
sure, for
Go
sure.
ahead. Go ahead.
Um, I always forget the guy's name. What is his name?
Well, his name is Philip Anthony Mitchell, but there's Jackie Hill Perry, Eric Mason, and Preston
Okay.
Perry, if I'm not mistaken. So there's a bunch of them. Yeah.
What was the name
And
of the
conference is
conference?
Acts. I think
Acts
it's
20.
Acts 242 or something like that.
Okay.
242 or something like that.
So Philip Anthony Mitchell, who's this pastor who's on the rise, his meteoric rise in the States right now online. Jay Witt has been addressing some of his sermons on his channel, but they just did a conference where he brought some of the leading speakers in urban Christianity. Pastor Eric Mason, who is the general editor or compiler, I guess, of the book series Urban Apologetics. All these people came together for this conference.
Preston Perry, who's the husband of Jackie Hill Perry. Jackie
Right.
Hill Perry. Then you have Philip Anthony Mitchell. That's the fourth. And there's another woman who's like a doctor that was on it. So
they brought
so
7,000
go ahead.
people. They brought 7,000 people together for this conference, which was a huge success. And as the sermon clips have been making their way online, I addressed one of them a week or so ago on Exit Strategy. But me and Jay Witt have been saying we might want to come together, and not might want to, we're going to come together to be addressing several of these sermons, or at least clips from these sermons, as a way to just offer a counter perspective to this new resurgence because it's something like a revival, or at least they're trying to. I think they're trying this to me. This is how I see it. I may be giving it more credit than it deserves, but to
Hmm.
me, this is them rubbing the joints together clear and trying to resuscitate Christianity. I think all the
Hmm.
Christian conferences that you see right now is people realizing there is a huge exodus. At least there's at least a thought exodus, if not a literal exodus, of people saying, I don't need to believe that, or I don't need to at least take that literally. But then that is the
Hmm.
slippery slope to, well, if I'm not taking it literally, once I open that door, it's only a matter of time before I'm out the door. Um,
Hmm.
to me,
So
this is them.
may I
Yeah.
interject
Yes.
just real quick? 2020, I think, made a lot of folks, and you've commented on this many times. It made a lot of people. It forced many Christians to realize, oh, I don't actually need this weekly, because
Mm,
they couldn't. Many
yeah.
Christians couldn't meet weekly, and so that also led to basically a counter to that from the Christian church, where they're like, no, you actually do need this. And I feel like we're still trying to recover,
Yeah.
or
For
I should
sure.
say we are. The
The
Christian church
church.
is still trying
Yeah.
to recover from this exodus that happened due to just the pandemic,
Hmm.
basically. And then, of course, the pandemic's exodus led to a deconstructionist movement where people were starting to question it because they had enough time. They weren't constantly being indoctrinated. They had enough time to kind of like think about, well, why do I feel okay even though I'm no longer in a place that's supposed to be making
Right.
me whole?
Right.
And so then they start asking questions, and they start, they're just, everybody was perennially online because you couldn't do anything at the time. And so they're
Mm,
encountering all of these scholars and skeptics and stuff. And so I
mm,
do feel like what's going on now, almost 5 years later, is a Christian trying
yeah.
to, it's almost like they're trying to rebuild. It's like, was it Ezra and Nehemiah? Like they're coming back
Mm.
to Jerusalem and trying to reestablish the temple, and they're
But
weeping.
right, exactly. I was going to say. I was hoping you were going to tie that point
Mm-hmm.
in. Yeah. Why are they weeping?
What the former glory was something, and they're
Yeah.
looking at what's going on now, and they're like, but I guess this represents a kind of a departure from the norm, because Philip Anthony Mitchell's their conference here, this two Acts 242 conference,
Mm.
was so extraordinarily successful. It's almost like a beacon of hope and light
Yeah.
in a
Yeah.
situation where there's mass exodus and deconversion. I mean,
Yeah.
some of the biggest. Joshua Harris is deconverted. You
Mm,
deconverted.
mm.
JR is deconverted. There's so many public facing like Christian. I mean, even was it Peter Enns had to like eventually say, "Hey, I can't keep telling you that this stuff is true, right?" Peter
Hmm.
Enns, he writes these
Yeah.
books. He's not deconverted, but he's basically taking the
It's the
teeth out of the gospel.
deconversion and the deconstruction. And I think maybe a lot of them are more worried about deconstruction than deconversion because
Mm-hmm.
even if you just deconstruct, you're changing the nature of what this thing is. Like we said a minute ago, once you erase those categories of heterodoxy versus orthodoxy,
Orthodoxy, yeah.
deconstruction does away with a lot of that.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Peter Enns writes a book called The Sin of Certainty, so that now you can't be certain
Mm-hmm.
about what you believe. So I think for a lot of them, deconstruction is probably more of a threat than deconversion. And I guess
Mm-hmm.
all we're saying is conferences like these are trying to rope people back in as people are making their
Mm-hmm.
way out the door. And so me and Jay Witt are going to get together and and I think we're going to do some of them here on Ichabod, and then we'll do some of them on Jay Witt's channel because we want you guys to subscribe to Jay
Mm-hmm.
Witt's channel as well. But we're going to be addressing some of these sermons just to sort of offer a counter to this attempt to re-get the people who are on their way out the door. So look for
Mm-hmm.
that. And
Absolutely.
if you get a chance, please come back by or do it now if you're here. Drop a comment, not just in the live chat, but on the actual episode. That actually helps with what we're doing here. Make sure to like the episode if you haven't liked it already. Subscribe if you're not subscribed. And we'll catch you guys soon. Thank you guys for being here. Love you guys. Hope you're
Yeah, it was a
making your way
pleasure.
through
This
it,
is great.
making your way through this world without what used to get you through. In reason's name. We'll catch you guys on the next one.
Yes. And
Peace.
Albert will be with us hopefully on the next one, right?
Yes, sir. Yes, sir.
Yes, sir. All
So,
right.
all right,
Take
y'all.
care,
Much
man.
love.